Inside the cave, both divers were trapped. The exit tunnel had collapsed under a pile of debris, sealing their only way out. The visibility was so poor that they couldn't even see their own hands clearly. And now they had just a few precious minutes of oxygen left. One of the divers decided to swim back, hoping to find an alternate route, while the other stayed near the blocked passage. 5 minutes later, when he returned, what he saw was beyond belief. Welcome back, everyone, to another thrilling story from Information for All. Cave diving, you see, is nothing like normal scuba diving. In scuba diving, people swim in open water, where if something goes wrong, a diver can simply swim straight to the surface. But in cave diving, the ceiling and walls are made of solid rock. There's just one narrow path forward and back. If your oxygen runs out, your equipment fails, or you lose your sense of direction. Game over. Cave diving is one of the few sports with an extraordinarily high casualty rate. In swimming, there are about 1.77 deaths per 100,000 participants. In base jumping, the number rises to 43. But in cave diving, a shocking 138 fatalities per 100,000 divers. Every year, around 25 to 30 divers lose their lives in this extreme adventure. And even that number seems small only because very few people actually dare to try it. One of the most famous and feared cave systems in Florida is Sherlock Springs. It's like a maze underground. Some tunnels end abruptly, while others lead straight toward danger. The depth of the cave ranges from 80 to 120 feet, with a constant water temperature of 22 degrees Celsius and crystal clear visibility. It was the morning of November 17, 1991. The weather was calm. Sunlight danced gently on the water's surface. Members of the Woodville Karst Plain Project, WKPP, a team of professional cave divers, were preparing for a mission. Their goal was to explore new passages within the cave and map them accurately. Among them were two new divers, Bill and Parker. They were close friends, both obsessed with adventure. For them, this dive wasn't just another mission. It was a chance to break limits and set a new record. But they had no idea that this journey would soon turn into the toughest test of their lives. At first glance, Sherlock Springs looks like a small pond, just a 56-meter-wide circle with a depth of only 9 meters. But below that peaceful surface lies a hidden world, a massive limestone cave system that plunges 91 meters deep. The tunnels and chambers inside feel like a different planet altogether. This cave is part of the Wakula Cave System, one of the largest underwater cave networks in the world. The entrance begins with a tight passage known as Scar's Restriction Zone. It's so narrow that only one diver can pass through at a time. As they squeeze through, their shoulders and air tanks scrape against the rock walls. But once you make it past that narrow zone, a breathtaking sight opens up, like an underwater highway carved through stone. It's stunning, yet deadly. That day, the WKPP team divided themselves into 4 groups. Each had a specific responsibility, because in cave diving, one small mistake can mean the end. The first group stayed near the surface, monitoring the mission, keeping time, and ready to respond in case of an emergency. They were like the safety lifeline above the cave. The second group was in charge of placing decompression tanks at specific spots inside the cave. These tanks were suspended along the route so divers could use them for extra oxygen on their return. This task was the backbone of the mission. Without proper decompression stops, no diver could survive the trip back. The third group handled the safety lines and checks. They secured the guidelines, added backups, and ensured that the path ahead was clear and safe for the explorers. Finally, the fourth group, the explorers, included Bill and Parker. Their job was to go deeper into the cave and uncover new routes. Around 10 a.m., all teams entered the water. Bill and Parker checked their scooters and tanks one last time, whispered a short prayer, and then descended into the depths of the cave. About 20 meters down, they met George, a member of the decompression team. After a brief signal, they moved on, soon reaching the Scar's Restriction Zone. Adjusting their buoyancy, they used their scooters to glide forward through the tight space. Not long after, They arrived at a vast chamber called Wakula. The view was mesmerizing. It felt like floating freely in an endless ocean. Within 40 minutes, they reached Grand Canyon 4, and as planned, began descending further. The tunnel was narrow, but their scooters worked perfectly. After 25 minutes of careful maneuvering, they reached the lower Wakula room, where they finally spotted the passage leading upward. Up to this point, everything had gone smoothly. Even inside the confined cave, they felt surprisingly free. But when they noticed their oxygen levels dropping, they decided to turn back. Little did they know that this decision was about to change everything. Their freedom ended right there. When Bill and Parker reached the Grand Canyon turn on their way back, everything had changed. The tunnel looked completely different. The water was now thick with swirling mud and sand. Visibility was nearly zero. They couldn't even see their own hands. The once clear Grand Canyon had turned into a cloudy nightmare. Both divers instantly realized that this was a warning. Something had gone terribly wrong. Finding the right way out was almost impossible. They clung tightly to the guideline and kept swimming forward, believing that the scar's restriction zone was only a short distance ahead. But soon, their worst fear came true. The path was blocked. A pile of silt and rocks had collapsed, sealing the way upward. Even the guideline they were following was buried beneath the debris. Their oxygen tanks were nearly empty, and panic started to set in. Bill gestured to Parker and wrote on his underwater slate, "Stay here. I'll check the line." He swam back to the last turn to confirm whether they had taken the wrong path. But the line markers confirmed it. This was the correct exit route. Bill hurried back to tell Parker, but when he returned just 5 minutes later, Parker was gone. Now, alone in the dark, Bill's heart raced with fear. He flashed his torch around desperately, but all he could see was a thick cloud of silt. There was no sign of Parker anywhere. Then, suddenly, he noticed a faint trickle of water seeping from the pile of debris. Maybe, he thought, Parker had tried to dig through that spot to reach the other side. There was no time to think. His oxygen was nearly depleted. Bill began digging through the mud himself. Every second felt like death was closing in on him. The blocked section was only about 2 meters long, but for Bill, it felt like miles. Finally, after a grueling struggle, he managed to carve out a small gap and squeeze through. The tunnel now angled upward. As he swam up, he noticed a regulator hanging from the guide rope, probably Parker's, but he ignored it. He had no air left to waste. Holding his breath, he pushed forward with all his remaining strength. At last, he reached the decompression station at a depth of 30 meters. He grabbed an oxygen tank, inhaled deeply, and for a brief moment felt hope return. He thought the nightmare was finally over. But then his eyes caught something chilling. Parker's oxygen tank was still hanging there, untouched. That meant Parker never made it this far. If he wasn't at the debris site and hadn't reached the decompression station, then where was he? Bill's heart sank. A cold wave of realization hit him. His best friend was probably gone. Moments later, George, a member of the decompression team, descended. Bill quickly wrote on his slate, "Parker is dead." George tried to help Bill ascend, but Bill refused to leave without his friend. He was too heartbroken to think clearly. George went back up, called for help, and soon returned with other divers. Together, they forced Bill to the surface. The news of Parker's disappearance sent shockwaves through everyone at the site. Divers re-entered the cave to search, but there was no sign of him. Only his regulator and cylinder, lying apart from each other. The next morning, Parker's body was found floating near the upper section of the cave. He was wearing only his wetsuit. His gear had been left behind. But why had he taken it off? Experts later suggested that Parker might have thought shedding his heavy equipment would make him float upward faster due to buoyancy. But tragically, he lost consciousness just a few meters short of the decompression tank, and never woke up again. Years later, scientists investigated the incident and finally discovered the real reason behind the disaster. When the divers had first descended to 20 meters for decompression, air bubbles had collected beneath the cave's ceiling. Over time, those bubbles weakened the limestone structure above. When George exited the cave, part of that fragile ceiling collapsed behind him, triggering an underwater landslide, sealing the tunnel completely. The investigation also revealed that when Parker found himself trapped behind the debris, he realized he was still on the correct exit route. Without wasting a second, he started digging through the mud with his bare hands, hoping that by the time Bill returned, the path would already be clear. But somewhere during that desperate effort, his oxygen ran out. He never got the chance to tell Bill that he had already made a way out for him. That day, Parker sacrificed his life so that his friend could live. If he hadn't dug that tunnel, Bill would have perished behind that same wall of debris. We hope you enjoyed this emotional and thrilling story. Don't forget to like and share this video. And thank you all so much for your love and incredible support in the comments. You